Welcome to the Strong Parents Podcast with Kim
and Riki, supporting children by inspiring parents. Hi everybody and welcome to this week's podcast.
Hello,
we are very excited to be here. Yes, welcome back. This week's podcast, linking on from last week's podcast, we're going to be talking about how to manage those moments when your child in the home has, for whatever reason, their emotions are running really, really high, and in that moment, emotional regulation may be required, and it can kind of set off a chain reaction of, I guess, undesirable, unhelpful, emotional, stressful situations within the home. It's something that we actually see live, for want of a better word, in the club or when our parents and children come to us. But it's something that we hear about very often amongst our parents as well.
Big one we talk with parents about, big one that it can, trigger parents to contact us when there has been a big sort of explosion or something quite significant has happened. That can kind of be that last draw card to go, right, we need to do something about this. So, yeah, it is something that we support parents with quite often.
Absolutely. And generally what we find is the feeling, so when this happens, so when perhaps whatever it might be, your child's come home from school and let's say, for an example, their friend may have been mean to them or they've got lots of homework or something hasn't worked for them that day and they are just very often what we've had reported to us is that they are going hell for leather. So they may be saying really unkind things, their emotions are out of control, they're screaming, they're yelling, they're kicking, and this is actually at any age as well. We find that this can happen mostly within that tween age group, but younger and older as well. And it can be a really, really upsetting time for parents. It can be something that's really stressful. Parents are feeling like they're not doing enough, they're not supporting their child, they're maybe not understanding them, they are feeling stressed and hurt themselves because maybe what their child is saying is really hurting their own feelings and triggering them, bringing things up for them.
And quite often the child can point the finger at the parent. So the whole situation of what's brought up the issue may not be related to the parent whatsoever. However, in that moment, because the child's emotionally charged and the parent is the one in front of them, they start to dig at the parent just to transfer that emotion onto somebody else. So for parents, it can be a really challenging time because it could be completely unrelated. However, suddenly it's all about the parent, and in that moment the child can say things that are really hurting and are really upsetting towards a parent. That a child often knows how to upset a parent. We know each other better than anyone. We spend so much time together, so the child could say something that they know upsets the parent, or is something that's been going on in the household, or it could be anything as down to you don't do enough for me, or you don't care, or tiny little things. That as we said, transfers that back onto the parent then, even though it's something that the child's going through independent of the parent or the family.
Absolutely. And then what we find is, as a result of that, what parents are doing is, without realizing or without perhaps even meaning to, reacting back. So whatever is going on for your child or the child in the moment, the caregiver, the parent in that scenario, their emotions are getting heightened. Their voice is raising. They are maybe saying things that they don't necessarily mean, or they are expressing their emotions in, well, you've hurt my feelings now, and or you're not perfect either. Or what we find as well, those cognitions start going where it's almost like panic and stress. Oh, my child's acting this way. What do I do? How do I discipline it? How do I stop it?
Well, even before it gets to that point, it can often be taken as a personal attack on the parent. And like any human being, if someone's going at you, whether it's your child or a friend or a complete stranger, if someone's digging at you and purposely picking out faults with you or things with you that they know will upset you, it's very difficult to separate yourself from that. So as you're saying, naturally your reaction is to get your back up or retaliate or defend yourself or do something because of what it's evoked within you.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes what I do find though is that worry about how the child is behaving, because very often these instances aren't a one-off. They may be part of a series of ongoing behaviour. So we're finding parents may call us and be saying things like, she or he has been doing this for weeks now or for months, and we just don't know how to handle this and what to do. And it gets to the point where parents are perhaps, for example, disciplining in the moment because they don't know what else to do. So this behaviour is unacceptable. Now you've got no screen time or no dessert or whatever it might be, which actually heightens the emotion in the child at the time, and that's what's contributing to the snowball of the emotions, the escalation of the emotions in that moment. And actually the way that when it gets to this point, when we are in a position where parents are asking us, what would you do? What would you say? We would actually kind of recommend, where possible, the opposite.
Absolutely.
So trying what's happening in that moment when your child is going through whatever they're going through and their emotions are already here. What the parent or the caregiver becomes, or even the family unit, because it can be not just at one parent, it can be at everybody that's at home. What they become is a sounding board or a space for those emotions to be let out. And that's really what, in that moment as parents, that's what you are. You're actually the sounding board, and where possible, where you can take a moment to separate yourself from it and go, right, so I'm just going to put my shield up here. I'm going to, whatever you imagine it, and allow them to just bounce their emotions at me, hold space for it. And then when everybody's calmed down, we can revisit the behaviour, talk about what was unacceptable about it and how we're going to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think one of the important things to take into account is that you know your child best. So it's up to you to decide what's the best space to give your child. So some children, it might be that they do settle down a little bit more, or they are more comforted within their own bedroom and having that space by themselves and time to themselves. For other children, it might be getting out of the house, changing the environment, going for a walk, doing something active. So we recommend that you go off what you know works for your child. If you know your child just needs space from people and needs to have that quiet time, then allow them to have that quiet time. If they need to get out, if that's actually going to make them worse and it's going to make them more resentful and stew and for the situation to get deeper and deeper, then we don't recommend doing that. We recommend going, right, we're doing this, we're getting out of the house, I need you to help with this, or whatever it might be, just to try and remove the child from that situation, to break that ice a little bit and or break that tension a little bit, and help to get to a point where you can sort of reset things and start fresh.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of parents, for you and for yourself, sometimes it may actually even be at the point where we have to take a second before our child gets home or before we're seeing our child that day, actually take a few breaths, actually prepare to go into what may eventuate as a highly emotional situation. So it's even as simple as going, okay, so I know she or he is coming in from school, I'm going to go pick them up. The last 5 nights this week, they've been really highly emotional after school. Let's prepare. I'm going to get into the mindset of what I'm doing, and I'm going to put a shield around my heart. I'm going to put a shield around my worried parent brain that, as far as I'm aware, and what I've been parents share with me, is it doesn't switch off. You never stop worrying about your kids. Trying to get some distance from that, emotionally and mentally preparing yourself for that situation occurring. It's going to enable you to deal with it in the moment and hold that space and have that separation for yourself, parents, because we know how stressful it can be and affecting it can be. And then having that mental state to go into that can sometimes be really helpful. So then when it is occurring, you can hold that space and then you can come back to the situation at a later date.
And it's, it is a really difficult thing to do, and we acknowledge that's a really difficult thing to do. However, it's about having that awareness to go, whatever's happening with my child, it's not me, and understanding that because you are the closest person to them, you are going to be the one that they give the most to, and whether that's positive things or quite difficult things to work through. So it's a result of them and the relationship they have with you, why they'll put that onto you. So it's not about you. And as we said before, when you've got that coming to you, it is really difficult for you to separate yourself and to be that bigger person and go, they don't actually mean what they're saying. And it is all these emotions that are, their head's cloudy, they're thinking this, they've got so much going on, and they're just trying to vent that energy and get that out and express that emotion. However, they haven't learnt the right way to go about that. And that's where our role as parents or carers or mentors or whatever that role might be, that adult role might be in that child's life, our role is to help support them to understand the right way to go about things.
Yes, and these recommendations come from basis as well in experience and also in research that you're not invalidating the emotions. So what you're allowing, by giving them that space, you're allowing the child to work to feel their emotions, because their emotions are valid, whatever they are feeling. What you do want to be able to address when they've calmed down is how we can express our emotions in a more perhaps mature or helpful way for us, but we don't want to invalidate the emotions. So allowing them to feel their emotions, and also providing a space for you guys to discuss it in a safer space and a less emotional space after the emotions have calmed down, which is actually leading into our next podcast. We're going to be touching on how to have that conversation once the emotions have de-escalated or everybody's worked through.
And this can quite often be that missing link, because we so want that heated moment to pass that often when that has passed, we can be hesitant to bring it back up again out of fear that it might start evoking all those emotions again, and we've just maybe spent 2 days winding back down and getting things feeling comfortable again. Why on earth would we revisit that and bring all that up again? And this is where we can go wrong with things, and not embrace that opportunity to actually work through it and talk about things. So it's so important that we do try and de-escalate the situation and then revisit it, so that you can talk about it and can talk about how we can support our children to work through things in a different way and express ourselves, and for our children to understand the effects of their behaviour on us as well in a situation where then those heightened emotions aren't circulating around both of you.
And consequences and discipline may be applicable in that situation. So when you're having that discussion, it's not about in that heightened emotional state trying to let the child don't discipline them because it'll upset them more. It's more about helping the emotions to calm down at that point in time and revisiting it in a conversation to say, hey, look, how we behaved during that situation, or how we maybe behaved in the past where we're yelling and screaming at each other. It's not a helpful way to do things, and there are going to be consequences for future times that this happens if you continue to speak to me in that way, or if we continue to be behaving like this with each other. We both will have to have consequences. We need to not have this in the home, as an example of the dialogue. So we can go into more detail in that for next week's podcast, and we just hope that this week's has maybe validated a lot of the feelings that you parents out there might be feeling. I think a lot of people think that maybe they're the only ones that have teenagers or children that are saying they hate them and saying all these
screaming
hurtful
at
things.
them, slamming doors.
And not knowing what to do in those situations. So hopefully it's given you a few ideas of what to do as well, and getting to know, as Kim was saying, the activities and the things that help de-escalate emotions for your child, whether it's activity or a quiet space to themselves. And tuning in next week to hear how we work through the dialogue of the aftermath of the heightened emotion.
And if you have a question, if you're going through a particular situation, maybe you try some of these things and it just doesn't work for you, send us a message. What are your particular situations? What are your questions? We'd love to know more specific information about what you're going through, so we can even narrow down further and target particular situations that you might be going through.
Absolutely.
So the things that we go through are a little bit broad, and because we're trying to support as many people as we can, however, we're really interested in more specific topics and more specific questions. So if you've got a question, please send it in to us, because we'd love to be able to answer it for you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks, guys.